today. That's the start. And then after that, we're going to move on to The Wasteland and a couple of shorter poems and four quartets. And then in a year or so, we'll be ready to move on beyond that. When I was in grad school, I took a class with the poet Bob Mezzi. It was a class on 19th and 20th century poetry, I guess. And we got to Thomas Hardy, and he loved Thomas Hardy so much that we spent the rest of the semester on Thomas Hardy, week after week after week. We're like, he's like, no, we're going to do some more Thomas Hardy. So that's how I feel about T.S. Eliot and William Carlos Williams. So we'll all be doddering of old age by the time we get through with that. Well,
Yeah, now, Anne, I have to ask you in regard to that. Uh, I didn't do this, but I had professors that they just had favorite stuff, and so if you were taking a survey course in something, they didn't care. They were just going to spend all semester on the people they liked. Did
I
you
know.
do that? Were you guilty
No,
of
no, no, I did not do that.
that?
When I taught a survey course, I genuinely taught a survey course.
Right,
Yeah, I did
exactly.
teach a bunch of courses on a single author or a pair of authors, stuff like that. But no, a survey is supposed to be a survey. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to look at four, maybe four poems today. We're going to start out with two, look at two, um, which is toward the end of the extra things that I sent you. And the reason I want to look at this, I love it, and it's a happy poem. Do look at two. Love and forgetting might have carried them a little further up the mountainside with night so near, but not much further up. They must,
And
yes,
I'm sorry. I made a can you hear me?
yeah.
I made a document with the ones you suggested acquainted with the night. You want me to go back to the bigger one?
Didn't I mention two? Look at two.
Oh, two. I'm sorry.
Look at two.
How about this? Is
Yeah,
it two?
that's it.
Two. Okay. I just didn't have it in the same order. Sorry to interrupt.
Two, look at two. Love and forgetting might have carried them a little further up the mountainside with night so near, but not much further up. They must have halted soon in any case with thoughts of the path back, how rough it was with rock and washout, and unsafe in darkness. When they were halted by a tumbled wall with barbed wire binding, they stood facing this, spending what onward impulse they still had in one last look the way they must not go, on up the failing path, where if a stone or earth slide moved at night, it moved itself. No footstep moved it. This is all, they sighed. Good night to woods. But not so. There was more. A doe from round a spruce stood looking at them across the wall, as near the wall as they. She saw them in their field, they her in hers. The difficulty of seeing what stood still, like some upended boulder split in two, was in her clouded eyes. They saw no fear there. She seemed to think that, too, thus they were safe. Then, as if they were something that, though strange, she could not trouble her mind with too long, she sighed and passed unscared along the wall. This, then, is all. What more is there to ask? But no, not yet. A snort to bid them wait. A buck from round the spruce stood looking at them across the wall, as near the wall as they. This was an antlered buck of lusty nostril, not the same doe come back into her place. He viewed them quizzically with jerks of head, as if to ask, why don't you make some motion or give some sign of life? Because you can't. I doubt if you're as living as you look. Thus, till he had them almost feeling, dared to stretch a proffering hand and a spell breaking. Then he too passed unscared along the wall. Two had seen two, whichever side you spoke from. This must be all. It was all. Still they stood, a great wave from it going over them, as if the earth in one unlooked for favor had made them certain earth returned their love. I just think that's a magical poem. And a poem, a companion poem that you might want to look at sometime is a poem called The Most of It, which is about a man longing for counter love, original response, and then a great buck appears. And the last line is, and that was all. So all is a pun. It means both only that, no more than that, but also everything. So at the end of this poem, they say, this must be all. It was all. That is, it's something so powerful, so magical, that it can make these two humans feel as if the earth, in one unlooked for favor, had made them certain earth returned their love. So once again, as with Mending Wall, we're in a realm of walls, but this is a different wall. This is a wall erected by humans to mark a boundary between the human realm and the other than human realm, which is so unintruded upon that if something moves, it moves itself. It's like people don't do this, it moves itself. The rocks move, the earth slide moves, right? And we have this feeling of two pairs. Um, uh, a pair walking, taking a hike up a mountainside, getting as far as a fence, a wall, and then looking across the wall and thinking, well, that's as far as we can go. This is all. Got to turn back now. But then, as I'm sure we've all had happen, suddenly there's a doe there looking at them. And the doe stands so still that they can't even hardly be sure that it's anything. So the doe's watching them, and they're watching the doe, holding very still. The doe's not afraid of them. It doesn't turn and dash away. It's just calm. It's just looking at them. And then after a while, she goes away. And then again, they say, that's all. Got to go back. But all of a sudden, there's a buck there also looking at them. An antlered buck of lusty nostril, not the same doe come back into her place. And you have this feeling that, the two realms are looking at each other. They can't cross over into each other. That is, we can't be other than human. A doe and a buck can't be other than human. But we can behold each other, which is to say what? Both we can look at each other and we can hold each other, you know, in a sense of honoring or sheltering, holding each other. And then that's the end of it. So there's been this encounter, and that's the story. I think it's such a magical poem. And again, it's an eco poem because Frost is so fully aware of the presence and the reality and the beauty and the significance of this other than human realm, which is, watching us. When I was at Pomona, I took that course on Eastern religions, and I can't remember the name of the man who taught it, but he mentioned at one point that in Taoism, they'll paint the back of a chest, not just the front, because the eye of the Tao sees all, you know. And this reminds me of this a little bit. It's like there's this mutual seeing that's going on, this mutual beholding that's going on in this poem. So we'll move on unless somebody has comments about that poem.
I just happened to watch a video yesterday of an encounter this reminded me of with a whale, where this man has spent many years studying whales, and they recognize him, and they'll come. And one of them, one of the weirdest things was um, when the mother whale dives to hunt, it will leave its calf at the surface with a relative, and
Uh-huh.
it left its calf with this man.
Oh, that's so cool.
Anyway,
That's cool. Adopted into the whale kingdom.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's very cool. So we're going to look now at Acquainted with the
One
Night.
one thing I would say, and I just one comment,
Uh-huh.
um, is one thing I really appreciate about this poem and about a lot of these Robert Frost poems is that he speaks so plainly. I mean, he isn't making you dig for the meaning, or kind of, he's not trying to be consciously poetic, quote. He's just describing what he sees, and
Yeah.
yet it has this quality, this distilled, magical quality that you describe, and it's so accessible. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that's one of the most wonderful things about him. He cared, as I said last time, cared so much about the sentence, you know, the natural language, the spoken sentence and the speaking voice. And according to him, the poetry didn't lie just in the meter, didn't lie just in the kind of poetic appurtenances, but in the poetic shape of the sentence, you know. So let's look at Acquainted with the Night, which is another really amazing poem.
Which
Very
one?
different. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman in his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. This is a lyric. This is incredibly sophisticated poetry. We notice a couple of things about it, actually, a lot of things about it. First of all, it's the length of a sonnet, 14 lines. It doesn't break like a sonnet, but it's got, 10 line, approximately iambic pentameter lines. When far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. Pretty regular with some what's called initial trochees. I have, I have, I have, We wouldn't just say I have, and then it turns into iambic again. I have been one acquainted with the night. So it's metrically very regular. Um, we notice that it's in three-line stanzas until the last, so tercets until the last. And we notice that there's a rhyme scheme: night, rain, light, lane, beat, explain, feet, cry, and so on. And the rhyme scheme is terza rima, which is the rhyme scheme that Dante used in the Inferno, the Purgatorio, and the Paradiso. In Italian, you can keep that going forever because there's so many rhyme words in Italian, but English is like it's a lot harder. This is a short poem, and it ends with a very kind of stern, rigid couplet, proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. And then it circles back to repeat the first line, I have been one acquainted with the night. Notice that Frost repeats the phrase acquainted with the night 3 times in a 14-line poem plus a title. That is asking us to pay attention to what he might mean by that, right? I mean, he's really pressing down on that phrase, I have been one acquainted with the night. And the poem takes the shape of a complete circle coming back to its beginning. So we ask ourselves, what does that mean? We notice too, first of all, one thing, the first tercet is end stopped. That means at the end of each line, there's a period. In the second tercet, the first line is end stopped, and the second line leads into the third. That's called enjambment. Enjambment is a pretty cool word. It comes from the French word for leg. So an enjambed line has a leg on each side of the line break, as if it's straddling a fence. I really love that. Okay. So I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. And then the poem swells out even more. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye, semicolon. And it opens up again, and further still at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. So the poem to me has a feeling of swelling, you know, with the way Frost handles the length and the punctuation of the lines, or the length of the sentence and the punctuation of the lines. I noticed this too. What does it mean to say, I have been one acquainted with the night, rather than just, I have been acquainted with the night? Which he could have done, I have been acquainted with the night. But to me, I have been one acquainted with the night expresses this complete kind of self alienation, as if this person who's speaking has become the same person and yet another person. I have been one acquainted with the night. And then he starts telling you what that means to be acquainted with the night. I've walked out in rain and back in rain, seemingly not for any purpose, just going, coming back. I've outwalked the furthest city light. So back out into that darkness. I've looked down the saddest city lane. And then this kind of wonderfully self-conscious or even paranoid line. I have passed by the watchman on his beat and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet. Whose sound of feet? His own sound of feet, but it sounds like one of those suspense movies where somebody's following you and you stop and the footsteps behind you stop. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing. It's like the dislocation here is so subtle and so amazing.
Isn't it about a relationship ending? I don't know.
Far away,
I better say
an
goodbye.
interrupted cry came over houses from another street. Who's crying? That is not boo-hoo, boo-hoo, but calling out who? Something is going. Who knows? But not to call me back or say goodbye, you know? And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. Echoes of Hamlet here, the time is out of joint. O cursed spite that ever I was born to set it right. The time is neither wrong nor right. Is this luminary clock a clock tower? Is it the moon? It's at an unearthly height. And then we circle back. I have been one acquainted with the night. I just think it's an amazing poem. It's really beautiful and so
Mhm.
so compressed, so condensed. You know, that is it's as poetry, the formal accomplishment of it is really stunning. It's kind of one of my more favorite of Frost poems for a lot of reasons.
And on the question of I have been one acquainted with the night, I kind of took it to mean that he was a person who was familiar with the darker side of things. And not just, a passive observer, but one who was willing to go into the darker side of things and experience them.
Yeah, both willing to and unable not to,
Yeah.
you know? No, absolutely. Absolutely. That's very much what this poem is about. And also the next poem, Desert Places. Um, this feeling that there is an other there, which is also you, you know?
It's a little like Whitman saying, I too knew what it was to be evil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Although this isn't evil, this is
No, it's
just
not evil, but it's the same thing of like, you think I don't know this kind
yeah,
of darkness,
yeah,
but I know it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's go on to Desert Places. You know what? I don't have, let me I'm going to check the time, see how we're going. Okay, we're good. So desert places. Another, I love this poem too. You can tell I love them because that's why I choose them. Ha, desert places. And just listen to the rhythms of this. Snow falling at night, falling fast, oh fast. In a field I looked into going past, and the ground almost covered smooth in snow, but a few weeds and stubble showing last. The woods around it have it, it is theirs. All animals are smothered in their lairs. I am too absent spirited to count. The loneliness includes me unawares. And lonely as it is, that loneliness will be more lonely ere it will be less. A blanker whiteness of benighted snow with no expression, nothing to express. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. It's a cool poem. First of all, desert, when I hear the word desert, I think of sand and cacti, but it's not like that. It means deserted, absolutely, deserted. Um, I love the rhythm of the first line, snow falling at night, falling fast, oh fast. We get this feeling of the quickness of the snow falling, this kind of whiteout. I remember when I was little, my dad always took slides, tons of slides, and he would make us watch slideshows. And at the end, there would be the blizzard, like afterwards when the thing was still spinning, but there were no more slides there. And it was just like this whiteout, you know? So that to me, that's what this is like, is this whiteout. Remember the poem that we didn't talk about, um, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Frost is fascinated by the phenomenon of looking into a field or looking into a forest, which is vanishing because of snow. So again, this New England landscape. The ground almost covered smooth in snow, but a few weeds and stubble showing last. And this is in the ongoing present tense. What does this mean? The woods around it have it. It is theirs. What does it refer to?
Hmm.
It's very mysterious. The woods around it have it. It is theirs. It is this quality of what nothingness, it seems to me. This quality of annihilation, which somehow belongs there. All animals are smothered in their lairs. Then you have this strange line, I am too absent spirited to count. Count, again, is a kind of pun. Not only I am too absent spirited to count, like, oh, there's a tree, one, two, three, but I don't matter. I don't even count. My spirit is too absent to give me identity. The loneliness includes me unawares. So it's as if this loneliness is a thing outside oneself that reaches out to embrace one also. Do you know? And then we go into the future, and lonely as it is, that loneliness will be more lonely ere it will be less. A blanker whiteness of benighted snow with no expression, nothing to express. This just reminds me of what Emily Dickinson said in that letter about kind of losing a whole season. It's like, some kind of mental being absent to herself, that she doesn't really explain. But this experience is going to just intensify. And then you get the stanza that strikes me as a little bit of bravado. They cannot scare me with their empty spaces between stars, on stars where no human race is. That's a clever rhyme. Empty spaces, human races. And it's jokey, but it's kind of like whistling in the dark, you know?
Yes.
I have it in me so much nearer home to scare myself with my own desert places. So again, as Barry was saying, I think this poem is pretty straightforward. Do you know? It says what it intends to say. Um, but I also think it's very beautiful, and the way it sweeps forward in time toward the future and then turns around to offer this sort of counter, almost like a boast, but also a terrible self-acknowledgement. The desert places lurk within the self, not just out there in the vanishing snow-covered woods. Any comments about any of these three poems?
Hmm.
And uh, I see Doug has his hand up. I don't want to step on
Oh,
that.
okay. Okay.
Uh, go, Doug. I have one too.
Okay, I was just going to say that it reminds me, it's a very different poem, but it reminds me of Wallace Stevens' Snowman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And when we get to Wallace Stevens, for sure, we'll look at that.
Oh, good.
Absolutely. Yeah, nothing that is not there and the nothing that is. Another great, great poem. Yeah. And it's not a snowman, it's a snow man. Just like T.S. Eliot's poem is not the wasteland, it's the waste land, you know? Really makes a big difference. Yeah, good call. Good call. Tony?
Um, you mentioned, Anne, that you may have been in Hauser's
I was.
romanticism class.
I was.
And I don't know if I was with you or not, but I do remember a comment he made that has always stuck with me, which was the difference between, well, he was talking about why poetry resonates. And I think the same is true of a lot of things. And he said, the only difference between me and you and Wordsworth is that he can write.
Yeah.
meaning meaning that we've all had, we all resonate with these experiences, and the difference is he can write them down.
Absolutely.
Do you remember
Yeah,
him saying that?
That I don't remember, but do you remember when he started crying one day talking about Keats?
I think I would remember him crying. I think we had him in a different semester.
I'd have. Mine was my final semester.
So
Um,
was Yeah, so
it
was
was
mine.
okay. Well, but what year did you graduate?
68.
Well, we were in the same room. We were.
How could I forget him crying though? That's
Well, he didn't actually just blubber, but he was
Oh,
talking about Keats's Ode to Autumn, and he got completely choked up because Keats died at 26 and knew that he was going to die. And he wrote this amazing last poem with the lines, "Where are the songs of spring? I, where are they? Think not of them, thou hast thy music too." And he read those lines and he just like, that boy, and I'll never forget that because Mulhauser was not the weepy kind.
no, not at all.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, it's true. The difference between a poet and a non-poet is that the poet can write. That's
yeah.
fine.
Was reading something about Frost the other day, I think, and trying to do a little research. And I don't know what poem it was, but somebody asked him to explain it, and he kind of he said something like, "You mean in words that are better than the ones in the poem?"
That's really great. That's
What was that,
wonderful.
Frost?
Frost, yeah, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Directive, which is, as I said, the last great poem that Frost wrote, and it's really pretty amazing. So this is longer. I'm going to read it to you, and I have to admit, this is a poem that I think it's like I don't completely understand it, but I just absolutely love it. I think it's so beautiful. Directive. Back out of all this now too much for us. Back in a time made simple by the loss of detail, burned, dissolved, and broken off like graveyard marble sculpture in the weather. There is a house that is no more a house, upon a farm that is no more a farm, and in a town that is no more a town. The road there, if you'll let a guide direct you who only has at heart you're getting lost, may seem as if it should have been a great monolithic knees the former town long since gave up pretense of keeping covered. And there's a story in a book about it. Besides the wear of iron wagon wheels, the ledges show lines ruled southeast, northwest, the chisel work of an enormous glacier that braced his feet against the Arctic pole. You must not mind a certain coolness from him, still said to haunt the side of Panther Mountain. Nor need you mind the serial ordeal of being watched from 40 cellar holes as if by eye pairs out of 40 firkins. As for the woods excitement over you that sends light rustle rushes to their leaves, charge that to upstart inexperience. Where were they all not 20 years ago? They think too much of having shaded out a few old pecker-fretted apple trees. Make yourself up a cheering song of how someone's road home from work this once was, who may be just ahead of you on foot or creaking with a buggy load of grain. The height of the adventure is the height of country where two village cultures faded into each other. Both of them are lost. And if you're lost enough to find yourself by now, pull in your ladder road behind yourself and put a sign up closed to all but me. Then make yourself at home. The only field now left's no bigger than a harness call. First, there's the children's house of make-believe, some shattered dishes underneath a pine, the playthings in the playhouse of the children. Weep for what little things could make them glad. Then for the house that is no more a house, but only a be-lilacked cellar hole, now slowly closing like a dent in dough. This was no playhouse, but a house in earnest. Your destination and your destiny's a brook that was the water of the house, cold as a spring, as yet so near its source, too lofty and original to rage. We know the valley streams that when aroused will leave their tatters hung on barb and thorn. I have kept hidden in the instep arch of an old cedar at the waterside, a broken drinking goblet like the grail under a spell so the wrong ones can't find it, so can't get saved, as St. Mark says they mustn't. I stole the goblet from the children's playhouse. Here are your waters and your watering place. Drink and be whole again beyond confusion. So you get to that last line and you're like, beyond confusion? You know? I think this is a deeply mysterious poem. It's a deeply magical poem, and it's a poem about magic. It's a poem about myth. It's a poem about the Grail legend, but the Grail legend made pagan and made local and made broken. It's a poem about the opposite of forward movement, backward movement, devolving, moving back into the past. It's very much a poem about New England. It's a poem about modernization and anti-modernization or unmodernizing, you know? So we start with this, somebody, I can't remember who it was, said, what a magical first line made out of one syllable, rather vague words, and yet we know what they mean. Back out of all this now too much for us. We live in a world of now too much for us, you know? Probably more every day. Back in a time made simple by the loss of detail. That is to say, if we look at these lines slowly, we don't end up feeling that those olden times were actually necessarily simpler, but we sense them as simpler because the detail is lost. The detail is burned, dissolved, and broken off. We don't live in the middle of that time. We look back on that time. We feel ourselves to be in a time which is too much for us. And we look back at that time. But we're looking back, if we're in a place like New England or rural Mississippi, where the things that were there are there no longer. There is a house that is no more a house, upon a farm that is no more a farm, and in a town that is no more a town. So this repetition 3 times in a row, something that is and is not, is and yet is not, is and yet is not. You know, the road there, oh, we're going to go on a trip. This is a voyage. This is a journey. If you let a guide direct you who only has at heart, you're getting lost. And you're like, already, this is like pin the tail on the donkey a little bit. You're getting turned around. You're not going to be taken straight to a place like, oh, here's the site of the old McGillicuddy mansion. Not like that. This is a much more mysterious trip. And almost in a sense of like a trip, you know? It may seem as if it should have been a quarry. And then it goes on to talk about the quarry and talk about the fact that this is was carved, this land was carved by the glaciers. And then you get this feeling of the little mysterious invisible beings, the serial ordeal of being watched from 40 cellar holes as if by eye pairs out of 40 firkins. A firkin is like a little pan. What is this? Is this like little hedgehogs, little gophers, little mysterious beings, leprechauns? Who knows? Maybe nothing. But it's mysterious and it's kind of strange. And then he has this comment about the trees. We look at the trees and he says 20 years ago, they weren't even here. They think too much of having shaded out a few old pecker-fretted apple trees that the woodpeckers destroyed. These new trees with their rustling leaves, they're just shrubs. So now we're wandering, we're going on this journey, and perhaps we need to be cheered up a little bit. Perhaps we're getting a little freaked out. Make yourself up a cheering song of how someone's road home from work this once was, who may be just ahead of you on foot or creaking with a buggy load of grain. We're being accompanied by invisible beings that were there in the past, perhaps, going home after a day of work, riding a buggy load of grain. So this landscape is full of beings and entities that are both there and not there, called into being by nothing but language. The height of the adventure is the height of country, where 2 village cultures faded into each other, both of them are lost. And you think, I just thought of the pauper witch of Grafton. It's like, which town is going to claim her? Well, there one exists now. You know, both of them are lost. Now, here's the paradox. If you're lost enough to find yourself by now, so he who must find his life must lose it, you know, pull in your ladder road behind you. Your ladder road, what? You're up in a treehouse. This road has been a ladder. You're in a child's treehouse. Put a sign up, closed to all but me. Who's me? The poet. To anybody but the poet, the one who's talking to you, right? Then make yourself at home. You're at home here. And he starts describing what is here in this realm of words, in this realm of incantation, this realm of spell. The only field now left is no bigger than first there's the children's house of make-believe. Some shattered dishes underneath a pine, the playthings in the playhouse of the children. And then this beautiful, heartbreaking line, weep for what little things could make them glad. You start thinking about the little things that make us glad, the things of our lives, that in the distant future may exist as broken bits and pieces. Weep for what little things could make him glad. Then for the house that is no more a house, but only a be-lilac cellar hole. I mentioned last time, and Thoreau mentions this too, that if you're in the woods in New England, you might see lilac trees where somebody once planted one because they built a house and put it by the back door. Whitman, when lilacs last by the dooryard bloomed, But now this hole is closing over like dough. This was no playhouse, but a house in earnest. Now we've arrived at our destination where we've been directed. Your destiny's a brook that was the water of the house, cold as a spring, as yet so near its source. What is its source? Well, the source of a brook on earth is underground. What is the source of the waters of magic or the waters of heaven? It's something that's not under the ground, but who knows where. Too lofty and original to rage. This isn't just a common brook leaving its tatters hung on barb and thorn. This is a still brook, an originary brook. And then I have kept hidden in the instep arch of an old cedar at the waterside a broken drinking goblet like the Grail. And you're like, aha, this has been a search for the Grail. We found the Grail, but it's not the same as the Grail that Percival was looking for. This is a child's broken goblet stolen from the playhouse. It's under a spell, so the wrong ones can't find it, which is to say what? If you're the wrong one and you look at it, you're like, oh, that's a broken cup. But if you're on this magical quest that is the process of this poem, you have arrived at a place of great holiness, great power. Here are your waters and your watering place. Wherever here is, we've arrived there through the language and the journey of this poem. Drink and be whole again beyond confusion. With that last line, this amazing paradox that it's only by becoming completely confused, completely turned around, completely spun around, that we can become whole and beyond confusion. So, wherever this poem came from is a pretty amazing place. I just think it's just such an amazing poem. So we still have time to talk. I can inflict more poems on you, or we can just talk in general about poetry and Frost and so on. Douglas?
So this poem it's just like so New England. I mean, the whole area where I live was covered by almost 10,000 feet of ice.
Yeah.
And it totally changed the landscape. And there are places like there were hills in New Hampshire where there's this rock is polished by the passage of the glaciers, and there are grooves from the glaciers moving over the land. And where I am now, I'm surrounded by places where there are cellar holes.
Yeah.
And sometimes in a chimney, but usually just the cellar hole. And there's a place nearby where there's a cascade. It's like a stream coming down the rock face. And there is the foundation of an old mill that was there. That's a big foundation, but the mill's completely gone. I mean, it's like a whole civilization that's gone now from this area.
Yeah. Yeah.
And apple trees in the woods. It's really common to find apple trees in the woods, and the old farms that are no longer farms. It's pretty cool.
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
I was really struck at how
he used changes in his time perspective to almost like looking through a telescope that where you could look far into the past or closer into the details of what life was like. I mean, he starts off with this sort of middle past where the town is now abandoned and no one has been living there for quite a while. But then he shifts back to this geological time that Douglas is just describing, the history of the mountain and how the glaciers had formed it, a much broader perspective. And then I love the way he zooms in on the fact that there were children there and that individual children were playing in this playhouse. And then I was particularly uh, wondering about the part where he talks about two different cultures having lived in this village and put up a signs saying closed, as though he's describing some sort of almost political conflict that might have been having the town divided against itself or something. And we sort of wonder about the the lives of the actual people and how they were divided and of these children that were playing. Um, it gives it an intimacy that is different than the sort of meditation on death and nostalgia that I felt at the beginning.
Yeah, I think the part about the sign, put a sign up saying closed to all but me is not the same as the two different cultures. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to say I'm right about this, but I remember reading Edith Wharton's novella Summer, which describes a little New England town. Or if you think about, the two towns in the Pauper Witch of Grafton, it's like they're so isolated from each other and sufficient unto themselves that you could have two different cultures in a way of these two different towns, where they come together and then they both vanish, not necessarily through conflict, but just Douglas, do you have any New England thoughts about this?
Oh yeah.
Okay, Douglas will take over and explain
I
to us.
lived I lived in I lived in a little town called New Hampton in New Hampshire, and then I was away for a while, and actually I went to Hawaii, and when I came back, um, I I moved to a town called Center Sandwich, and when I ran into a friend of mine who lived in New Hampton, and I'd been on the fire department in New Hampton, and been part of the town life, and he said, "Oh, well, I hear you've moved to Center Sandwich," and because that's the way people in the towns like New Hampton viewed the folks up on the hill in Center Sandwich, because it's like we're the ones who bought properties while they were going under. In front, we live the winters in um, Boston or Rhode Island or something, and then we come up and we're the summer people, and but we want our amenities, so that there's a lot of town and gown stuff kind of,
Hmm.
where they want all these amenities and they want their roads paved and everything, and the country people are like, why? If you pave this road, people are going to drive too fast. So
People might
the,
come there.
can have, yeah, exactly. And because you might be in a town that nobody goes there unless they're going somewhere else.
Yeah,
you know yeah,
yeah,
so it's just like, it is New England. He knew New England.
he sure did. Yeah.
I like the directions about getting lost. I think that directions, even if people are giving you directions to some place that really exists, they often will be sufficiently confusing that you do get lost.
I know.
I'm reminded when we were in Ireland and we were trying to find Dan's uncle Bernard, and we were supposedly in a nursing home, except the one we went to, he wasn't there. So we're out in the country in some outside some tiny village in County Galway. And, there are a lot of abandoned houses. It's a little bit like this description. Well, they didn't know about him. So we went across the street, and curiously, there was a pub sitting out in the middle of nowhere. So we went in, got some lemonade, and they recognized by our accents that we were strangers, not even Irish. And when we said we were trying to find Uncle Bernard, they said, "Well, he must be across the street." No, 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 he's not there. Well, Bernard must be. Then he'll be in St. Francis. And okay, so they give us directions, which are rather like this. You go to the corner and turn at the barn that isn't there anymore,
Yeah.
and you can't miss it. It looks like It looks like something that used to be a monastery.
Yeah.
We follow these somewhat um, mysterious directions, turn at what looked like it might have been a barn that wasn't there anymore, and wander along, and eventually come to some buildings that look like they might once have been a monastery.
Yeah.
And sure enough, there was Uncle Bernard in the nursing home. So it was the ending was a little bit less Grail-like than this, but the directions were that reminded me very much of getting directions in New England. That
Yeah.
I,
It's really great. I'm glad you found Uncle Bernard.
Uncle Bernard, Dan looks more and more like him every day. He was the last of the uncles living in Ireland where Dan's mama grew up, but we did see the farm where she was born and raised, and went out and saw a what used to be a well that supposedly was dug by St. Patrick
Ah,
in
uh-huh.
in
They dug
between,
a lot of
chasing out
wells.
snakes and
They dug
converting
a lot of
people.
wells in Ireland. That's great.
So yeah, we were also told that that's where they used to hold mass when they were forbidden to do it. That they would go out and sneak out into the fields and have
Yeah.
mass there. So
Yeah.
I think that this feeling of what used to be there, and the sort of um, layers of memories that are attached, and layers of history that are sort of like a palimpsest, if it
Mm.
were.
Palimpsest, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that um, confusion, but also memories and history that I think it. I lived in New England, and I know exactly what Douglas talks about the layers there. But this was also the case in Ireland, which as yet does not have, or barely has reached the population it had before the famine.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah, very.
I have two comments. First of all, I really like the simile closing like a dent in dough. I thought that was great. I never thought about it that way, but I thought it was a really apt simile. I also think it's interesting that the Grail, when he sort of gets to the point where he's kind of through ruminating about the memories of what was, it's the spring. It's the one thing that survived all this. The buildings are all gone, the people are all gone, but that source of the water that nourished them is still there. And that's the thing that allows him to bridge into a future of saying, well, now this is a new place for whoever's going to come next. And they have that spring to draw on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, and there's such a turn inward in this poem, you know, once we're putting the sign up that says closed to all but me, and then it's like, I mean, it's a poem about poetry. It's a poem about language, and it's a poem about the ability that the great poet has to call forth the holy, you know, so that the great poet isn't just somebody using words in fancy ways, but is somebody with this archaic, powerful role to play, um, that has to do with, calling down the powers that are at the center of creation, really. It's an amazing poem. And it's such a good summary poem. I mean, it's by summation poem, I don't mean summary like summer. I mean like a summarizing. Yeah. So anybody else? Final thought? Go ahead.
I just kind of I went for a walk this morning, which I often do, and I carried this with me because I'd read it last night and didn't understand it at all. And I thought of a few things when I was walking, and then when you were going through it the second time, I came to this point in the poem where it's all confused. I mean, you do get lost, you're wandering, God knows where you are. And he says, what is it? The height of adventure. And then it goes on, put up the close sign and follow me. And then it's like, I felt like it was a magical mystery tour. He's like an imp. He's hiding by that tree. He's waiting for you to come by, and he's got this goblet of water that he said, it's like the Grail, except it's not exclusive like that. We're all going to get into heaven. And then he kind of concludes with this line, and I'm sure other people have thought of this. It reminded me of Dover Beach, that at Dover Beach, it ends with confusion of struggle and flight with ignorant armies clashing at night. And Frost is saying, hey, poetry can take us away from that. That's how I read it. Poetry can say, drink this water and you're not going to be confused anymore. That's how I read the ending. It was very hopeful and playful, and you got to go into this fantasy world. The other thing that hit me just now is this fantasy world he takes us into, this field, he says, is no bigger than a harness gall. I didn't know what that was, so I just looked it up. It's a saddle sore. Mm-hmm. A harness gall is where, the stuff rubs on a horse. Mm-hmm. And so that's pretty little usually. So we're down in this place with him. I really like this poem because I think he's saying, it's easy to be depressed, but come on, there's magic water out here. That's how I took it. Anyway, it was a nice walk.
Yeah.
What you said, Deborah, reminds me of the Van Morrison song, and it stoned me.
Yeah.
What? Yeah. And it stoned me?
To my soul.
Stoned me to my soul. Stoned me just like Jelly Roll.
Oh,
stoned me.
It's a song. It's a song about a guy.
Water.
Water. Exactly.
Yep.
That.
Yep.
It's very. It's very. I don't know. It's reminiscent of the mood to me of this poem.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great song.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. It's a magical poem. So, final thoughts on Frost. Neil, you're being so quiet. You're so quiet because you're mute.
No, I'm the one who's always, day late and a dollar short. A week from now I'll have some thoughts, but I'm entranced by his ability to spot these little details that he then weaves into things. When you look at this poem, Deborah's just talking about the harness gall and stuff. It's like he's in the Fiskins. It's like all these pieces that he picks up, that images that allows him to get to where he's going. But they're so, but they're they're tiny, and yet they're can be manipulated in a way that it makes them particularly useful. It's sort of like you get the, because I listen to a lot of books, and some of them you listen to, and it's supposed to be really good, but the writing just grates on you. The similes, there's so many of them. The similes, well, that was, okay, you had to say that, but it's like he doesn't do that. He just picks this stuff up, and he just kind of puts it in front of you, and then you sort of get that, as Deborah says, that can't be very big, right? Or what's a fisk? What are the the firkin? What are the eyes that come out of the firkin? It's like, does that even make sense? But it's sort of to get you. This is the firkin, this little container, right?
Little tiny animals. It's like it's like one of those. Who's that great Japanese anime film guy that made Totoro and all those? what's his name?
Uh,
Kayazaki.
Miyazaki.
Yeah, whatever.
Miyazaki, yeah.
This is like something
Miyazaki.
those little eyes in the Firkins that reminds me of something in one of his films. All these little scurrying creatures like that, you know, and they're benign. They're not attacking, but they kind of give you the willies, you know. Yeah. Brian, how about you? You've been quiet.
Um, Actually, I have nothing profound to say about this. You commented on the opening line. It took me a couple of minutes to work out the syntax and what it was actually talking about.
Yeah.
And there's some places in Frost where I really have to struggle with the words. I So yes, he does speak with a natural diction, um, but sometimes it takes a struggle to see how natural it is.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I really love this poem. The final line brought tears to my eyes.
I know. It's so moving. It's so moving because see, poetry is not just addressing our rational minds. If it did only that, it would not be poetry. It's addressing our bodies, it's addressing our emotions, our feelings, you know? And Drink and Be Whole Again Beyond Confusion is very much addressing um a level of spirit and a level of the heart. It's not a rational statement. You either do it or you don't. Do you know what I mean? It either happened to you or it didn't happen to you. And that's what poetry can do. Yeah. And
And
I
this,
would say about the first line, of course, Frost is wanting us to get confused. So he starts out with back out of all this now too much for us. And you're like, what? You know? Yeah.
and the poem also delighted me because I'm going to see Parsifal in a couple of weeks.
Wow. Where?
San Francisco Opera is doing it,
Oh my goodness. That's great.
and it's a very confusing opera. I have a feeling it doesn't make any sense to anybody except the composer himself, but it's glorious.
That's great. Well, everybody, thank you for being here. And you have some time to sink deeply into T.S. Eliot. And I will see you the week after next. Except Laurel, you won't be here the week after next. Is that right?
Um, just the Thursday, and it depends on whether the shutdown is still on because my study section may be postponed if
Okay.
or whatever. And we won't even know. We signed on for a training session a couple days ago, and the training session website was still up, but there was no NIH person on it. And we realized we're not supposed to be talking to each other without an NIH person present. So
Yeah.
we talked a little bit anyway about what was working and what wasn't, and then went away. So, but I completed my training.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Never mind that I just had one 2 months ago, and so yeah. So I hope I'll be there, but
Good.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we will
Uh,
see
and,
you.
and
Thank
by
you.
the way, I'm not getting all the emails, so yeah, I may be left off the distribution list sometimes.
Well, did you get the T.S. Eliot attachments?
I did not.
Send me an email. And
I'll just send you an email. You can respond.
send me an email because
I,
you have a very weird email address. Send
well,
me an email and then I'll send it right
Okay,
back to you.
I will give you okay, it's very simple. It was named after Clark, Carol, Sander, Neil, and Twix. Twix being a
Yeah.
cat.
Well, that's
That's
simple.
that's where it
Well,
came
that
from.
makes glorious sense, but don't
Hey,
ex
Neil, copy me on that email too, would you?
I'll be happy to.
yeah,
Okay.
Yeah, it's been rejecting at my end anyway, when I just reply all to what somebody else does, it doesn't go to Neil. And I
Interesting.
pointed that out, so I don't know what's got to be fixed, but
yeah,
that's probably the
Okay.
reason.
Okay.
yeah.
I'll be happy to send it to you guys. All right.
Okay. Take care, everybody.
Okay, great. Thanks. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Have a good week, and
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.